Throughout Cuphead, there are optional missions known as run-and-guns. These missions help you obtain the coins necessary for items at the shop. Now what if I took away those optional missions? You might respond saying there are still coins you can collect from NPCs or around the map. Then what if I remove the shop? You might respond saying the challenge would still be easy with chalice and super arts. I think you know where I'm going with this. Today I'm going to attempt to beat Cuphead without run-and-guns, without chalice, without super arts, and without the shop. This challenge is probably one of the hardest challenges I've ever attempted, so before I get into this video, I'd like to thank the Cold Winter for suggesting this idea to me in the comment section of my last video. Oh, and by the way, this means the only gun I'm allowed to use throughout the entire challenge is Peashooter, which isn't exactly the best gun in the game, but we'll see how it goes. Oh, and if you'd like me to do a challenge, leave a comment below. Sometimes I pick one challenge from the comments to try out, so you never know if I'll pick yours. So yeah, without wasting any more of your time, let's get into the video. The challenge starts out just like any other. I go talk to Elder Kettle. I then moved into the tutorial and took the free coin at the end. But soon after doing that, I kind of realized that technically that wasn't fair for the challenge, because at the time I wasn't really sure what the rules were, but I just kind of restarted after this, so yeah. So then, as usual, I moved on to the root pack, the first boss I always do. Oh, and by the way, during this video, I actually will be skipping over some of the fights because, well, if they're not very notable and nothing really happened and I beat them pretty quickly, I'm just going to skip over them. I'm doing this for the sake of time and viewer experience. But if you really want me to, I could make like an unlisted playlist for all the video proof. This boss wasn't really hard at all because I genuinely don't ever really have weapons when I beat this guy, so yeah. After that, I moved on to Gouple Grand, killed him, I'm skipping over him, and then I moved on to Ribby and Croaks. Ribby and Croaks was actually pretty easy during this fight, which is a nice change of pace considering the last time I fought him was during a attempted challenge and it did not go well. I'm not talking about the no dashing challenge, by the way. I actually first tried him here, which was pretty nice. I then moved on to Hildeberg, which was the second hardest boss, because Cagny Coronation was actually the hardest boss. I'll get into that later. Oh, and by the way, I'm talking about freeing Glyzel 1. This is not the hardest boss of the challenge. Yes, I skipped an entire stage of that fight for that effect, and yes, it looked kinda good. That was a callback right there, if anybody remembers. Honestly, Hildeberg wasn't really that hard after a few tries, but yeah. The challenge didn't really affect flying missions, except for, I guess, that I can't use the heart charm, but yeah, that's about it, so it was pretty easy. The challenge was still kind of easy here. I'm only saying it was the hardest because, well, all the other ones were really easy, so it kind of just makes sense. This was one of the few where it actually took me more than one attempt, so yeah. The second and final phase was kind of hard if you messed up a jump, but besides that, it was really easy as well. Finishing that out, this is when the challenge got hard, moving on to Inkwell 2. For now on, just assume unless I tell you that I spent upwards of like 10 minutes on each of these fights, and some of them actually even took me 30 minutes or more. Starting off with Baroness von Von, honestly I felt like I was regressing, but that was probably because I wasn't using any of my usual stuff, but honestly I just felt like I was getting worse at the game because I wasn't doing as well as I was. Probably because I wasn't using Chalice or any of my guns that I like using. This was actually a pretty hard boss for me, which was kind of startling considering I had all these other bosses to go through, and if this one was this hard, I didn't know how the other ones would be. Finishing out Baroness von Bon, it was time to move on to Wally Walbers. This fight made me kind of angry on multiple occasions, but I got it eventually, so yeah. Honestly, this phase was the hardest part, and it also was kind of like it kind of looks like Mega Mind. I know one of my friends was, one of my friends called this his Mega Mind phase. All in all, this boss didn't take too many attempts. It's kind of like if you're doing a normal playthrough. It's not that hard in the end. Next up was the Jimmy the Great, which was previously easy, but this one was kind of hard just because how long the fight was, and yeah, honestly, it was just kind of normal fight, except I couldn't use charms. I honestly thought this phase was kind of weird. Like, I mean, look at the faces of them, and some of the pillars even have two faces, which doesn't even make sense. The face of him in a sarcophagus is literally just the same as always. I will say though, this one face here is probably one of the coolest phases in the entire game. And the big head phase. The big head phase looks kind of hard, but honestly, he's a lot easier than he looks. I then move on to Beppy the Clown, and you think that would be easy. No! It was not easy in the slightest. It took me so many attempts. I actually spent an entire hour on this one guy. I don't know what it was. It was his last phase that really got me. I have no idea why though. In the wise words of my friend Talk, this phase was a joke. All I did was stand under him. But like I said, the third phase, that's when it all went downhill because I don't know what it was, but the third phase was really hard for no apparent reason. With that finally wrapped up, it was time to move on to Grim Matchstick, and I really didn't know what to expect. I actually went to sleep after that, and then woke up the next morning to continue this. For most of the challenge, I completed it all in one day, but this challenge actually spanned across a couple days. Honestly, this fight only really took me around 15 minutes. I was actually expecting a long time, but I did realize that if I took a break and came back, I did a lot better. So yeah, 15 minutes, not bad. Although I didn't really know what awaited me after Inkwell 2. I'll just let you know right now, it wasn't fun. Moving on to Inkwell 3, it actually started off pretty good with the captain guy. I still don't know his name, somebody tell me. Because I'm still far too lazy to check. All in all, this fight really only took me around 15 minutes, a similar time to Grim Matchstick. There's not really too much to talk about this fight, it was more of the same, really, just, you know, shooting. All I will say, though, is the last phase was kind of hard to shoot him, because, you know, you're shooting the bullet straight ahead, and Cuphead's a little too short to hit him, so I'd have to jump up just to hit him, and then honestly, it was pretty weird. I then attempted to beat Rumor Honeybottoms, failed miserably for like an hour, and then went on to Calamaria the next day. There isn't too much to say about Calamaria. She was really just the same as always, you know. The fact that I didn't have a shop or just anything didn't really affect it too much. I mean, it took a bit longer because I didn't have a heart charm or something like that, but honestly, it didn't really matter. I'm going to skip over Sally's stage because it was really easy, but I am going to move on to Dr. Call's Robot now, a little bit harder. So you know how I said Dr. Call's Robot would be hard? I lied. I beat it on my first attempt. I don't know how I did, but I guess I was feeling really good because I went to sleep again, woke up, and this was the first boss I attempted that day, so honestly, it was pretty pog. I will say though, towards the ends of the fight, I always get pretty nervous and sometimes I slip up because of that, but honestly, dodging the projectiles became easier as I did it. I then moved back to Rumor Honeybottoms and beat them in like, I don't know, 30 minutes, I don't know. Honestly, it's crazy to think how long this fight took me. It was the third phase, I'm telling you guys. It was the third phase that always got me. Like, I'd be sitting here doing fine on the first, second phase, but on the third phase, I don't know what it was. Shooting down at an angle is hard enough already, but shooting down leftwards... Okay, think of this. I use WASD, so shooting down left at an angle is hard for me. I don't know if that makes sense to you guys. I then moved on to the Phantom Express. The Phantom Express actually took me around an hour-ish to beat it. Yeah, it wasn't fun. The first and second phases were always easy. They didn't really get affected by the fact that I was using Peashooter, but the second and third one definitely did. The third phase was hard because of the angle of which I was shooting it at, because I'd always be shooting from the middle when I was shooting at them. It was a really bad angle because it didn't work with my controls. But essentially, I found out later that if I stand under them and I get some good RNG, it'll work out in the end. The third phase was hard because I couldn't hit the engine very accurately because it was constantly moving over the place, and my shot is directly straight. It's not like Chaser or Roundabout where it has some leeway, but really, I don't know. It was just insanely hard to actually hit. So, yeah, but I did eventually get it, but, like, I'm glad the phase wasn't very long, because if it was a bit longer, I would have had a lot more trouble with it. But I did eventually get it, so it's all good. Now I want to move on to King Dice, and going into this, I thought King Dice was going to be very hard. But really, it only took me around 20 minutes to get it, which is a lot less time than I originally thought it would take. The main problem was by the time I got to the final phase, I'd have like 3 or 2-ish hearts. 3 if I was lucky. But honestly, it was hard because it was kind of hard to parry the cards consistently, so a lot of times I'd get really close and be almost at the end and then fail because I didn't do enough damage. It also helped out a lot that the extra HP points were on 3 and 6, which is for the bosses that I usually do. I do 3 because it's more than 2 and 1, and it's pretty easy, and 6 was just convenient because it had an extra heart on it, so yeah, it all worked out in the end. And to top things off, I got the easiest boss in the game, in my opinion, the 8-ball. Like, literally, this guy is such a joke. You can just stand under him and shoot him. I'm just glad I didn't take any more time, because honestly, I assumed this one would be kind of like the no dashing challenge, but I don't know. I guess I got better at the fight then. I don't know, I think I just got a lot of really good RNG during this fight, which allowed me to beat him pretty easily, so I'm pretty happy about that, I guess. So yeah, as you can see here, I'm just jumping over the cards, parrying them, and shooting him in the forehead, and whenever he stopped shooting cards at me, I'd shoot EX shots at him, and honestly, it was just kind of cool. I only actually took 1 piece of damage here, and I even got an achievement for beating the boss with more than 3 HP. And just like that, I was on to the final boss, the Devil. Now, I'd be lying if I told you this boss was easy. Quite the contrary, actually. This boss was really hard for me, and honestly, I kept getting that feeling in my stomach. I don't really know how to describe it. Basically, I kept getting this feeling in my stomach, and it was just like, man, I'm right here. I could be done with this video, but can't beat it. But I actually did beat it. Now, the boss itself wasn't necessarily hard, but what would happen is it was just a combination of all the slip-ups I'd have. Slip-ups were pretty common, so it would take away 1 HP, and since I only have 3, I'd be left with 1, and whenever I get down to 1 HP, I don't really play as good because I'm always, I don't know, it's hard to explain. But it did help that Peashooter was actually a pretty solid gun against the devil, except for when it did a spider phase. Like, I actually genuinely hated those phases. They annoyed me so much because I couldn't do a lot of damage to him, and yeah, it just wasn't very fun for me. It did help, though, that his final phase was kind of a joke, honestly. I only died once on his final phase, but I only got to his final phase twice, so I don't know. It was kind of a joke. So yeah, I just completed the challenge. Honestly, this challenge was probably the hardest challenge I've ever done. This challenge actually took me like 3 days. Actually, almost like 5 days. It might have actually even been a week, I'm not even sure. Also, I'd like to mention that my Ethernet cable actually came in, so I might have better gameplay footage. I don't know. As of recording this, I haven't really tested it out, so maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. So, to answer your question, Minecraft Dude 24 from my last video, the hardest challenge I've ever done is beating Cuphead without Miss Chalice, without Super Arts, without the shop, and Peashooter Only with no running guns at all. This was a lot of fun to record. Again, thanks to the cold winter for the challenge idea, and thanks to you guys for, watching the video, making it all the way through. I hope you have an amazing day. Goodbye!